Hey there, it's Donna here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I am in the Netherlands in my childhood room and I'm going to be doing a massive unhaul for you guys. So what I did was I tallied up all the books that I've ever owned before and I realised I owned about 1,550, and that is all fine and good and wonderful and a huge honour to have all of these books. I'm very happy with it, but actually I decided that the maximum amount of books that I want to currently own as someone who is not a homeowner and who is renting and has books in 2 different countries while some are in storage, maximum I think 1,500 is the key number to have. So what I've decided to do is unhaul around 50 plus books, so there's over 50 books here, and I'm going to let them go to new places, go to new homes. I've also sorted through all my book totes and bookish merch and they will be going to new homes as well, and I'm here to chat about the 50 books that I'm letting go of. They are all books that I've read before or duplicates, so I was unhauling entirely from the books that I've read, my read collection. And without further ado, let's get right down to the books. So we've got quite a lot of books here where I have multiple copies now, because I do tend to upgrade my copies. If I really love a book and I've read it in a format that's like paperback, my preferred format is always hardback, so if I can get a hardback I will get that in, and if I can get a special edition I will. So The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, I think it's fantastic, massively perfect gothic classic, and I have the Folio Society edition, so I don't need this paperback. I do, however, love this paperback because it's of the Netflix adaptation, which is my favourite TV series ever. I just don't need 2 copies of this book, so one's going. The Secret History by Donna Tartt, it was just time for this to leave my shelves. Honestly, I gave this 3 stars back when I read it, and I kept it because that was the time when I was like caught up in the booktube hype, and if it was hyped I wanted to keep it and have it. But really, I just didn't love this. I just didn't love this. Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I have the new editions that Fourth Estate have done, so I don't need to keep this double copy. Even this is the OG one that I read, and if you haven't read Annihilation, please do. It's so good. It's such a good sci-fi, weird, abstract book. I love it. I love the film adaptation. Then we have It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is completely a book that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun with, but has been completely scarred by the fact that every Tessa Bailey book I've picked up since I've absolutely hated. And now I just can't look at a Tessa Bailey book the same way. So I need to get rid of this one, even though it was one that I read and enjoyed. Tales from the Cafe by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I enjoy this series. I've got this in a hardback with a sprayed edge going. We have some doubles here, so American Queen, American Prince, and also Salt Kiss. These are all doubles. I keep my owned books in the Netherlands here, so that means when I do sponsored videos with publishers on certain books, they do have to send me new copies because I just don't have the copies in the UK to hold up anymore. So they sent me new copies of all 3 of these, so I don't need to keep these double copies. Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Shirley. I have so much love for this book. It holds a very special place in my heart because it educated me on the Mid-Autumn Festival celebrations that happen for some South Asian and East Asian communities that I just didn't know about before. I absolutely didn't know about before, and so this gave me a lot of education, and it was my first introduction to mooncakes. In fact, I have a whole video about this and trying different mooncakes for the first time. Since then I've had a lot of mooncakes. I absolutely love them, and so I will always remember this book fondly for introducing me to the mooncakes, but I just don't need to keep it. I read it, I had a good time, moving on. How to Find a Missing Girl by Wlosok. I don't need to keep many of my thrillers. You know, a thriller, the main thing is the plot twist, and once you know it, that's it. If it's not one of my all-time tip-top favourite thrillers, I shouldn't actually be keeping it. So good, very good YA thriller, and I think it's one of the most realistic YA thrillers I've read to date still, but it's still going. So these are doubles from when I had to do my Alexis haul recommendations video with sponsorship and they had to send me copies. So we've got Boyfriend Material, I had a double of that. Pansies, double of that. For Real, double of that, and also Glitterland, double of that. Now this is a proof I would keep some doubles in my collection because I do like to annotate sometimes if I have the time. I very rarely do it, but for some of my favourites I want to start doing it upon reread, and I reread these all the time, so I really should annotate them. However, with Alexis Hall in particular, I started reading their books when they were indie published, so not for boyfriend material because that was never indie published, but for Pansies, Glitterland and For Real, I have all the new publication editions and all the indie publication editions, so I already have doubles. I don't need triples. I've got some hardcovers, so The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I absolutely love this book. I got myself the Illumicrate special edition, no longer need to keep this hardback copy. A Girlhood by Carolyn Hayes. I think this book is really important and really eye-opening, and it also tackles being a mother of a transgender child as someone who is a Christian and who is accepting of their child, and so I am going to give this to my mum for my mum to read. And then we have Is This Okay by Harriet Gibsone. I thought this was a really good memoir. I really liked it. It was my first book that really informed me about like early onset menopause and what that can mean to people, and it's also a lot about parasocial relationships, which some people really need in their lives these days. But yeah, it was a good read. Again, with some non-fiction, you know, you read it, you get the information, and you don't have to, you know, keep the physical book. We do all of these in one go. These are my childhood books: Anna and the French Kiss, Lola and the Boy Next Door, and Isla and the Happily Ever After by Stephanie Perkins. I read these as a teenager. These were like all the rage back in booktube. I'm like dating this video with how long I've been in this community for, but I really liked these as a teenager, except for the first one because that one was about cheating, so I didn't like that as much. Isla I really liked, that was my favourite, and Lola and the Boy Next Door was full of like queer acceptance and queerness. However, it still just wasn't my favourite one, and so I think again it was the time when I was just keeping books to keep them rather than them being like my ultimate favourite thing. Let's see what we got here. So oh gosh, we're way back in my teenage years. I read The Alchemist, and I'm not saying it changed my life like some of the, you know, bros say, but I did think it was a very like moving and impactful story on, you know, some wisdom in there, and I don't think it will give me the same thing if I reread it today, but it was a time, okay? I've just decided I don't need to keep the fiction Jamaica Kincaids that I've read and aren't my favourite thing. So At the Bottom of the River by Jamaica Kincaid is a collection of short stories, and Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. I read both of these. I liked both of these, but I think the Jamaica Kincaid that's made the most impact on me is still Small Places. Small Spaces? Small Places. Something like that, so I'm keeping that one. This is How You Lose Her by Junot Diaz. Heard some things about this author that I, you know, don't need to keep it. Love is a Revolution by Renee Watson. I actually really like this YA contemporary. I remember I buddy read this with Hannah from Le DM, and it was a loose buddy read, but it was a good one, and it was like about activism and being your true self, not telling lies, and I like the elderly teenager relationship we have, but again, I'm not going to reread this one, so why am I holding on to this proof? Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This is a classic for a reason. I've read it multiple times, and I think I'm done now. The Week at World's End by Emma Carroll. This is a lovely middle grade historical fiction set around the Cold War time. I love my middle grade, however I don't read much middle grade historical fiction, and when I read this one I was very impressed by the fact that it could make me interested in a time period where I thought I wouldn't read much more historical fiction in. So this was absolutely fantastic. I think it can just be passed on to a child reader. Similar story for A Flash of Fireflies. This one has OCD representation, which is kind of done in a magical realism way, and I think it was done very well, and I like the story, but it can just go to a child reader. I've been watching Gavin Reads It All videos a lot lately, and I just really love how he donates middle grade and just passes it along to the age audience, and so even though I love a lot of the middle grade that I read, I'm going to try and get a bit better about passing it on to people of the age audience for them to be able to read it in an accessible way, whether that's donating it to a second-hand shop where it can be bought very cheap, or donating it to a library. Probably a second-hand shop now that I'm here in NL though. The Dead Fathers Club by Matt Haig. I think me and Matt Haig are pretty much done in terms of fiction, and this is like a Hamlet retelling, which is why I was holding on to it, but you know, I am pretty much done with Matt Haig's fiction, so not because he's done anything bad, just because it's not my cup of tea anymore. Faust Part 1, I read this during uni. I really liked it. Actually, this is, you know, that's not gonna go. That's going back on my shelf. You know, I just thought like I didn't need this classic, and then I remembered how much I enjoy a good play, and I thought, why am I unhauling this? So that's going back on my shelves. Don't look at that. So Slay by Brittany Morris, I didn't actually love that much, but I didn't dislike either. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was an okay read, and it managed to accomplish what it wanted to do. I've got so many tabs in this because this is one of the books that I wrote my dissertation on. So I did a dissertation which was on Afrofuturism, and it was looking on like 2nd generation and 3rd generation diaspora, and how that depiction of Afrofuturism in young adult compares and differs, and what it's communicating is different to what is communicated in Afrofuturism for adults when the term was first coined, and when it was written for 1st generation Afro and Caribbean people. That's a long roundabout way of me explaining my topic because I don't remember the exact title. But yeah, Slay was one of the ones I wrote on. You can see how much research I did. I had so much fun writing my dissertation, and I got a first in it because I slayed. But again, I'm never going to reread this. I was keeping this for dissertation nostalgia, and I don't need to do that. My dissertation is mine. I have it. I don't need to keep the book. The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. My thoughts on this have just like deteriorated over time, and my enjoyment of Greek mythology retellings has been oversaturated, so much so that even though I still enjoy reading them, I don't feel like I need to keep all of them. Will I ever read this again? No. Goodbye. The Confession by Jessie Burton. I read this. I liked this. Will I ever read it again? No. Goodbye. Mish the Bad Demon is a really cute and really fun graphic novel. I actually highly recommend this if you just want a good time. I love a good graphic novel that just makes me happy, and this is what this one did. It's very cutesy. The thing is though, it's a series and I'm not going to continue the series. So why should I own the first one? I shouldn't. Okay, American Sweetheart by Adriana Herrera. I read this entire quartet series and I thought I was going to collect them all physically, and I just know I'm not going to do that anymore. It was a time. I really like these romance, but they can stay as ebooks on my Kindle, and I read more Adriana Herrera after that. But yeah, that can go. Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding. This is like an anniversary edition, hardback, beautiful, shiny. I read this and I thought it was fine. It's not aged very well, and I like the first film. That's the only film I've seen, so it's not like I'm a big fangirl and have watched all the films either. That can go. Got a couple more here. So we've got Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Silko. I read this in uni. It's got some kind of indigenous representation in it. It's a literary fiction book, and it took me on a really extensive journey. I strongly and vividly remember my feelings when reading this book. Like, I was in my feelings and feeling what the characters were feeling. Really lovely. I don't think I need to keep it. Also has deckled edges, which is controversial in booktube, but I love a good deckled edge. Made You Up by Francesca Zappia. Look at this cover. I did a photo recreation of this. I don't know if I can find it, but this was in my early days of Bookstagram that I recreated this cover, and so I remember this so fondly because I loved it so much. And there's like a plot twist, and I was like, wow, never saw that coming in a character-driven book. I now know this is not the best representation of schizophrenia, so... 2 hardbacks. So this one is What Happened to You by Oprah and Bruce Lee Perry. It's about like trauma, specifically childhood trauma, and it's on conversations on resilience and healing. Very informative. If you want to read non-fiction about childhood trauma and like overcoming that and moving on from that, this is a very good one to try. And then I've also got In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende, and this was the first Isabel Allende book that I ever read, and I really liked it, and I've since read more of her works, but I don't think I particularly need to keep this one. So onwards it goes. We have now made it to the last stack of books. So first of all, we've got A Nurse's Story by Louise Curtis with Sarah Johnson. This is a nurse's experience in the A&E ward during COVID. I read this during COVID because I am brutal like that. If I'm in the midst of something, I just read about it. And it was really interesting and really observant. I will never read it again. So it's going. Oh, this is so special. This is like my childhood. Okay, so this is Killer by Jimmy Coates. No, this is Jimmy Coates' Killer by Joe Craig, and this series, I read this whole series when I was a child. I was a big into assassins and spies, you know? All the people who read like Zack Power, Series of Unfortunate Events, you know. all of those kind of books. That's what I did when I was a child. And my school was very special in that they had a relationship with Joe Craig, and he would come over every year, and for like top English students they would have a dinner with him, and he would sign their books and give a talk. I was selected for that, and so this has been very special, but I only own this one, and I'm never going to reread this series, and I don't really feel much of a need to hold on to my childhood books as like souvenirs of that moment anymore, unless they are like toppity favourites, like the fairy books. If you're not the fairy books, you're not staying. Similar story for this trilogy. I really was a historical fiction reader when I was a teenager. So we have A School for Unusual Girls by Catherine Baldwin, Refuge for Masterminds, which is actually book 3, and then Exile for Dreamers, which is book 2. And this is about these girls who are sent to this finishing school, and then they're not very happy to be there, but when they get there they discover that they are actually undercover spies. And yeah, these were like, again, spy books, teenage classics that I really enjoy, but I don't feel like I need to hold on to. We've got this massive Riverside Chaucer, which I read in secondary school, and I always remember fondly because I really had so much fun with these tales. I did not have as much fun needing to translate them in uni, but you know what? I got by, I passed, but it's huge, and I don't need this brick, you know? Blood's Revolution by Angus Donald. Again, this was a historical fiction back in the day I had so much fun with. It was about a period of history I didn't know that much about, so even though it's not entirely factual, I had so much fun reading this book. But I read the second one and I didn't love it as much, so I decided to stop reading this series there, and so I don't need to actually keep this one too. I'll just remember that I used to love historical fiction and I don't love it anymore, and I'll just hold those memories in my mind. We've got The Familiar by Stacey Halls. I read The Familiar and I really loved it. Again, this is when I read more historical fiction. This is set during the like rich witch trials period of time, and I really loved this. This was also one of the very first events like in London that I was invited for in person, so again, very special moment because it was my first time showing up there as a blogger ever. And yeah, I'll remember this fondly for being my first influencer event, but I just don't read historical fiction like this now, and I've since read actually quite a few Stacey Hall books and I haven't enjoyed any of them as much, and that's probably just because my tastes have changed and shifted away from historical fiction where it used to be. And same story for the last one. Ecstasy by Mary Shower is a historical fiction book that I read on a book blogger friend's recommendation, and they hit it out of the park. This one is particularly about, is it Vivaldi's wife? I think so. And I really loved it because I used to play a classical instrument. I used to play the harp, and so you know, I still do love listening to classical music, and I always feel such an affinity to it. So getting to read a historical fiction book about a classical musician's wife, who was also a musician but wasn't allowed to play, was really satisfying, and I really like this, and the cover is stunning. But yeah, time for it to move on. And there you have it. Those are 50 books that used to be in my collection that will be leaving now, except for Faust, which gets to stay. And thank you for joining me for this unhaul. I do unhauls fairly regularly on my channel. This will not be the last one, especially as I want to try and maintain that around 1,500 books, so I've got to be being very selective with the books that I keep. Please let me know in the comment section down below, when you unhaul books, do you tend to pick them out of books you've already read, or are you brave enough to unhaul books you haven't tried yet? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!